Hello and welcome to the Inside Social Work podcast, where we take a peek behind the scenes into different fields of social work, engage and inspire practitioners, translate research into practice and encourage lifelong learning. I'm your host, Marie Vakakis. Thank you for listening and I hope you enjoyed today's podcast episode. Hello and welcome to the Inside Social Work podcast. Today I'm interviewing Allison Parker. We're going to talk about innovation, creating new services, and I won't give too much away. I'll let her share a bit more about what that means. I just want to start off by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that I'm podcasting from today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to the podcast, Allison.
Hi, thank you so much, Marie. And I'd like to start by just saying my pronouns are she, her, and that as a cisgendered female, I understand my extreme privilege being educated white female, and also acknowledge the fabulous LGBTIQA plus community out there, the current and the past, who have kind of paved the way for the work that we're doing here.
Excellent. And so we met a little while ago at a local MHPN meeting. So if you're listening and you're in Australia, that's a really great resource. I encourage you to go to the MHPN website, the Mental Health Professionals Network, and you can find some networks close by. A lot have moved on to telehealth onto Zoom. I was going to say telehealth. They're onto kind of online forums at the moment. So you might be able to attend some that are in different areas that you might not have access to. So we met looking at transgender mental health and supporting young people and their families. And we had a side conversation. So do you want to share with listeners where that went? What's going on?
Yeah, that was a fabulous introduction. I was so excited when I saw that opportunity to participate in that meeting. So it was with the psychiatrist, Dr. Tram Nguyen from the Royal Children's Gender Service, giving us information on young people, so either pre-adolescent, pre-puberty or adolescent youth that accesses the gender clinic there, who are either questioning their gender or quite solid in their gender identity and seeking help to affirm their gender. Affirming your gender can take on many different forms for people, and I think in youth it's quite an unknown area, especially for parents who are trying to navigate it, trying to be supportive of their children. But sometimes parents really don't understand what it's all about, especially if they've not been exposed to other people that may identify as transgender, diverse or non-binary. So the workshop meeting was fantastic, and we just got chatting amongst the group where everyone's level of interest was, and I kind of identified that I was starting an innovation challenge as a lead to look at the unmet needs of the transgender, gender diverse, non-binary community out west, to see what do they need, what is lacking in the western suburbs of Melbourne, and what can we do to address it. I work at a community health centre. My past professions is as an emergency nurse and paramedic, so I've always worked in health, always worked out west and lived out west. So for me, it was just a perfect opportunity to see what we could do.
Yeah, absolutely. So we got the talking about your project and your innovation challenge, and it was really exciting. So we know that there are very few services, especially for young people, and I know your innovation project's not around necessarily for young people at the moment, but we were trying to kind of brainstorm different services and different options for young people to access mental health support, as well as a range of other support around gender identity. And that's when your project piqued my interest. Tell us about the project. What is it and what can we look forward to happening?
Yeah, sure. So I might start off by saying that my interest really came about because my daughter, who's now 20, she came out as transgender to me at the age of 18. I've been supporting her for years with her mental health issues, and her mental health team and myself, we kind of knew there was a sticking point that we weren't really getting to. Like, we knew there was something in the background that was kind of stopping the progress of her therapy and her treatment. So when she came out to me, and then I told the psychiatrist, because she was a bit scared how to approach that, it all just made sense. And for me as a mum, it was like this sigh of relief, but also disappointment that I thought she didn't know how to tell me. And I was like, oh, is that the whole thing that's been really troubling you and really causing an effect on your mental health? And I suppose the blessing for us is she didn't even realise. So her friends kind of realised before her. So when we were accessing, I was trying to find services, and it was as basic as, where do I start? What services does she actually need? And ultimately, for me, it was, who is going to be safe, welcoming, and that we got the right information for what she needed. And that's when I realised there is nothing out west, like next to nothing, certainly public health-wise, nothing. We travelled to the north suburbs of Melbourne, who are fabulous. Let me tell you, the existing services that are around are amazing, but they're overstretched. They've got massive waiting lists. The professionals that work in there are very passionate, but very overworked. So they were issues. And I suppose as a health professional, I'm like, we could do better than this, like out west. We deserve something like this out west. So
where were you working at the time? Were you in this role?
No. So this role's kind of been created because I saw a need. So I work at a community health centre called IPC Health. We're one of the largest in Victoria, certainly the largest in the western suburbs of Melbourne. So we encompass Brimbank, Hobsons Bay and Wyndham municipalities. We do some work out at Melton also. So our values at IPC Health is about being creative, passionate and making a difference. And there was an opportunity called the inaugural Shark Tank Innovation Challenge, where I don't know if anyone's seen the TV show Shark Tank. So it's basically that, where we submitted applications to pitch our idea, our vision, to leaders in other organisations like businesses. So there was like leaders within the Murdoch Institute, Movember, the Youth Council, and that's where I pitched my idea that there is a real need out there, out in the western suburbs, to support the transgender, gender diverse, non-binary community with their health services. So specific health services to support their affirming their gender, but also what we found is that they're not even attending mainstream services for their general health needs. So I pitched the challenge and this innovation challenge, and happy to say that we were funded quite generously to run a 5-week innovation challenge or workshop. We did 10 workshops. The difference with our one compared to other ones in IPC was we actually made a point of having a community-led. So we brought community members from the trans, gender diverse and non-binary community to work with us. So we could find out really what do they need, how do we do it, and also importantly, how do we know we're doing it right for them?
Yeah.
And it was amazing. We've just finished that a couple of weeks ago, and we presented to the executives of our organisation yesterday.
Excellent. So a lot of sort of, well, maybe not at the point of co-design yet, but a lot of in being informed by service users themselves.
Yeah, so the Innovation Challenge by its very nature is a co-design platform. So we had two facilitators who were able to navigate us through that. We had three outcomes we wanted to achieve. So they were that we clearly defined the problem and the unmet needs, identify and secure possible partnerships that can provide safe, trusted, and integral care. And also third was to create a high-level model that we could look at implementing. Look, initially, we were wondering if we were going to meet the third outcome because there was so much information to unpack. When you work with community, and let me tell you, it was an absolute incredible experience, and I'd encourage anyone, if they're looking at implementing new services or expanding their existing services, to really think about bringing those community members that are going to access this service on board. So there was a whole range of information. As soon as we started our Zoom, it was this amazing wealth of information, but you could tell that the community members have been waiting a very long time to share their stories, their trauma, their experiences, their barriers, and what their hopes are, more importantly, for services out west. But from that, we did create a model, like I said, that we've presented to our executives, and it was really received well yesterday. And more importantly, we identified that we want our community members to continue working with us to create that service.
Excellent. So what is the proposed service, or what are some of the actual outcomes?
Yeah. So with the proposal, it was pretty evident that to meet the needs of the community, there was two underpinning themes that were major considerations. So it's the physical health needs that a person needs to not only affirm their gender, but it became very apparent that people are actually not going to mainstream GPs, clinics, any services until they're at crisis point because of the trauma they've experienced or the harm they've experienced in the past. So this could be as something like being misgendered or using their dead name, so using the name that they were assigned at birth by their parents, but they don't identify with, but through to just a lack of understanding from professionals. Many explained that they were kind of seen oddly, like they would get stares, they would get asked questions that a person that had the same condition coming in wouldn't be asked those questions. So it was the physical health, but then also mental health. That is another major consideration. So what we've adapted in our model is that we require a multidisciplinary service for the person accessing our health. So this is not only a GP, it would be a nurse to assist with taking of testings like cervical screening tests, education on breast screening, testicular checks, all of those that for the cisgendered community, yes, they're uncomfortable, but we tend to do those things. Whereas for the transgender, non-binary or gender diverse person, that can be quite traumatic. So with that, we also want to implement a wellbeing coordinator, counselling support. The other things that we're looking at is partnering up to have pathology services and a pharmacy included in that, because pathology, so their blood testing, is quite regular with their hormone replacement therapy. We've got to monitor their hormone levels, but also the pharmacist can be a quite confronting place when they're needing to regularly go and get their prescriptions.
Yeah. So what I'm really hearing, and I think, and we touched on it a bit in the meeting when we met, was around it's not necessarily always stigma, but a lack of understanding that's a barrier to receiving not just gender specific healthcare, but overall healthcare. So as you were saying, feeling uncomfortable or unsafe to access your regular local services. And so people are not attending and maybe letting other health challenges that have probably often nothing to do with their gender expression or their gender identity go unchecked.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we did some interviews also. So we had community members on our core team that we met for the 10 workshops, but we also had opportunities to do interviews. We had a 20-person young person group as a focus group. And it was just, especially as a health professional, it was just really upsetting for me to hear that people were, like with a urine infection, were waiting until things were so desperate that they would go to the emergency department because they would rather be treated there because they don't have to regularly see them like a GP, that they'd get their treatment and go off and they'd be almost like just, absorbed in the crowd. But for me, I was like, wow, that, that's jeopardizing your health. So you can get even added complications from that. Yes, you get your treatment, but who's doing your follow-up care? Who's ensuring that, you get your blood test following up to make sure that the condition has improved or the medication you're on is correct? And also maybe some education in some settings. So that was quite upsetting. But at the same time, as a group, it was quite like we believed everything that was being said. Everything, there was never any doubt about the content that was shared was ever inflated or misrepresented. Like these were very raw stories, but I could see it. I could see what would be happening or visualize it. So for us, the main aim is to improve health outcomes for everyone in our community, which that's what the premise of our public health system is about. But also the people that feel marginalised and vulnerable have the same opportunities of accessing health services to address their health needs. And a major factor of that is actually mental health support also.
Yeah. I mean, we could have so many episodes on this topic. So I'm trying to keep it contained because I do get excited. I'm absolutely enthralled in what you're saying. It's part of me wants to ask what are some of the do's and don'ts for other people who don't yet have access to a targeted service, but I'm also wondering for our listeners, most of them are in social work or other allied health. So this systemic thinking is so helpful. So maybe there's a way to kind of answer both. So just hearing some of those bits and pieces and all the stories of the community groups, the co-design process, what are some general do's and don'ts that practitioners, providers, people listening can take away to maybe make that journey a little bit easier for some clients?
Yeah, and look, that's an absolute great question. And it was a question we were asking our community members too, because when we're looking at designing a service, we're not only looking at a specific service for the community, what they told us is they still want to access mainstream services too. So it is basically from the get-go, you know, your environment, making sure that it is welcoming, that you've got signage visible, that either it's a flag or posters saying that everyone is welcome here, that we don't tolerate any bad behaviour, harassment, bullying, or discrimination. They're really important signs for people. The community said they do actually look for those subtle signs in the places that they go to. For the clinician, especially, I suppose, if you've got your own private practice, but even organisations, is looking at your paperwork, making sure that there are areas that you can identify a person's identity, their sexual orientation, their pronouns. So you can use the correct pronouns when speaking to the person. So whether it's she, her, him, his,
him.
yeah, and they, them, or some people go with their own pronouns. So we have community members using their own name as a pronoun. So it's being able to identify it, but use it more importantly. And as a clinician or a person that works with people of the transgender, diverse, non-binary community, and let me tell you, if you think you haven't worked with them, you absolutely have. It's just not been visible to you, or they haven't felt safe to say it, or a need to say it.
Yeah.
But always introduce yourself as the same, you know, to the same standards. So when I came, you know, started with you, Marie, I said, I'm Allison, and I use she, her pronouns. That way we're on a level playing field. You know, there's no kind of distinction that someone has to disclose something to me that I don't need to disclose to them.
Yeah.
So
yeah. What we've had another presenter talk about a similar topic, and they encourage people to think, what's the one step you can do after listening to this? So is it in your email signature, on your LinkedIn profile, you know, whether you have a flag visible on your lapel, like a little pin, or in your office, or changing your pronoun. So there are things that people can do almost immediately.
Absolutely.
And one of the questions I get from some of my you know, supervisees and some of the students I work with is they're scared that, what if the person, I say I'm not judgy and I'm open to this, but then they ask me something I don't know. So there's this fear of unknown. And I often encourage them to actually say, there are some things I don't know. How about I meet with you tomorrow, next session? Let me do a bit of research and get back to you. It's actually okay to say, I don't know, as long as you're open and curious.
Absolutely. And I think that is a good basis for just being a human also, to be quite frank. I do it with my kids.
You're a human.
Yeah. I'm just like, I don't know that at the moment. And I think showing that vulnerability, even in your professional setting, puts the person at ease. That you're not making things up for the sake of answering a question. If they're asking you a question about you, you can ask them to clarify. And what kind of information are they seeking?
Yeah.
And I would say, from the utmost, if you do misgender someone, or not use the correct pronouns, apologise, correct your mistake, and then move on. The community, what I have found, is the most compassionate, understanding, and respectful community members. And they would, you're building that level of trust and safety by showing those gaps in knowledge, and they might be able to educate you. Like, it might be a term that you're not familiar with that they're using. Ask them, but ask them in a respectful way, out of genuine curiosity, to better yourself. I know there are some community members that say, look, we're kind of sick and tired of trying to educate other people. And that might be the case for your client or patient, and that's okay. But many I found, if you are genuinely really interested in knowing their story, they will offer that information.
Yeah.
But be open.
And I think that's the key. Like you said, it is about being a good human, but that curiosity, it's across the board. Like you can, across any presentation. I mean, I'm coming at it from a mental health professional where I think someone might throw me a curly one and I think, I actually don't know a lot about that. Let me park it for now and I'll get back to you and I'll go and do some research. And then if it's something that I think is beyond my skill set or can't easily be, knowledge that I can absorb and work with, I might then say, just like a GP might, I think you need to go to a specialist. Here are some recommendations. Let me ask my peers if they've got anyone they recommend. And people seem to like that honesty, that you don't pretend you know anything, and give them the option. Sometimes it's as simple as saying, I don't know a lot about that. I can learn with you in my own time. I'll do the reading, the professional development, the secondary consult. We can do it together. I'm happy to refer you on. We can jointly work some. So what would you feel comfortable with? And often people like that honesty, regardless of the topic, whether it's gender, a particular family issue, a relational dynamic, a mental health, maybe a rare presentation, just saying, I don't know a lot about it. What's your experience? What's important for me to know? And let me get back to you let me freshen up or brush up on my skills.
Absolutely. And I think that is a great attitude to have and way of practicing. I know as a health professional, I've always said the day I stop learning about something is the day I need to kind of put this away, because our world is always developing. There is new information, new skills and developments in both health and mental health. And I think as a practitioner or a clinician, it's our duty to continue learning and identify our gaps. Our community members have told us that they know when someone is bluffing or lying to us. And they would rather that you would be honest and you don't know something and that you're happy to work on that than giving them information that might not be factual.
Yeah.
That sometimes it can actually hurt them, or be dismissive, like if it's not validating their concerns. We did speak quite a bit about our model that we're looking at introducing, that we talked about the concept of being either person-centered or what's the correct term. And as a collective, we actually didn't like the word person-centered, because we almost visualized it as that we're in the middle and everyone's looking in on us and talking to us coming in. So we were more looking at our model, and we don't know what the term is yet, but it's more of a person-led model, that our transgender, gender diverse and non-binary folks actually know their body the best. They know their identity the best, and they're the best people to tell us how they want to affirm their gender.
Yeah.
So I think with any professionals, we all know there's certain people that have a very, very big power in their profession, and it comes through if you're that vulnerable client or patient, if you have that attitude that you've done all of these qualifications and you've had this experience and you may have done research, and it's not to invalidate that at all, but as a client or patient, that's not what they want to see. They want to see someone on their level that can speak to them and collaborate with them to get the best health outcomes for their situation.
Yeah. One thing that comes to mind as you mention that is, it makes me think about that earlier point you were making about the struggle to access generalist health services. And I work with some young adults who I've only ever known them as the gender they identify with now.
Hmm.
And so we don't need to keep revisiting things from the past, but just being aware that some of their experience in either their journey coming out, the secrets they've had to hold, people's judgments or stigma, that has had an impact on who they can trust and how safe they feel now. So sometimes it's recognizing the intersectionality as well. Like they might be coming for just a regular relationship issue or a workplace issue or some anxiety or rumination that has nothing to do with their gender identity, but maybe how they trust services, how scared they are to open up, the little t trauma that they've experienced in their story, that has had an impact.
Absolutely.
And so we don't need to make the gender the front and center, but just recognizing and sometimes even averting, saying, I wonder if, you know, you've had trouble trusting people in the past, asking really general questions that show that there's an understanding that they're not struggling at the moment with their gender, but that journey has maybe contributed to a distrust in services, challenges with interpersonal relationships. Maybe a friend or a parent has said something that's sort of stayed with them and kind of is hurtful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also we don't want to rule out also that even though they're very comfortable with their gender identity, there are a lot of people that aren't able to come out safely for either fear of stigma, discrimination, violence, hate, or even just isolation from their family, friends, network. So it is a lot about trauma informed work that has to take place with the transgender, gender diverse, and non-binary community. So I think your points are very, very valid, Marie, and I think they're important to always have those in the background. But you're right that you don't need to keep harping on their gender when they're very affirmed and they know. Often that is not the angst that they're coming to you with. It's all the associated past traumas or past experiences or even the current troubles they're having. We talk about affirming a person's gender and the transition to do that. There is social and then medical, which can lead into surgical or not, and then the legal affirmation or transition. So people do those 4 steps, not in the same order, and some only do a couple of them. Everyone's journey is different and is okay for them. Some people won't socially come out until they feel that they have medically transitioned, so whether they're using hormone replacement therapies or other therapies to appear to the community more to the gender that they're identifying with. But others are sometimes happy just to affirm their gender socially, so out with friends, out in their school, their workplace, their family, and don't want to do any of the others, and that's okay too. And I think I think people think that when someone is transitioning, they're going to go through the whole gamut and even surgically transition, and there's not actually a high percentage of that. So it's important that people understand that and be okay with it, because they're certainly okay with it. But yeah, I think we need to recognise that this community is quite susceptible to ongoing discrimination and stigma and harm. So even though they're very affirmed in their gender, we're not quite sure sometimes what their experience at home is. So we do need to be very mindful of that, because unfortunately a lot of people are not still safe.
Yeah. And I think, on a softer approach to that, I think it'd be great to even have another episode where it's just looking at the impact it has on family, not
Yeah.
necessarily from lack of support. Sometimes just a, grief is the best word I can think of particular formula for life or a particular journey. And I think that's a challenge in maybe the adult services where the moment someone turns 18, the family is not routinely included in that conversation. And I think it can put a lot of pressure on the young person or the young adult to lead those conversations with, like to navigate. I'm an adult, I'm independent, I want to do this, but I might want to repair relationships with my parents. How do I include them in this? How do they stay involved? And I think that's a really tricky space where even some older clients, it might be, how do I navigate that with my children that I'm now transitioning or I'm identifying differently? And there's so much in the family and the system thing as well that can be a real protective factor or be a really big source of loss and grief and trauma, and sometimes a bit of both.
Yeah, and you bringing that to this place, you're right. It is actually probably another topic, and I know Dr. Tram knew and mentioned it, that when she sees young people at the Royal Children's Gender Service, that the actual person that wants to affirm their gender is quite settled in their decision, but it's the family that needs to catch up and need the support to be able to support their child. So she was saying a lot of her work is about supporting the family through that process for themselves. The Q group that I met with were fabulous. So they were aged between 12 and 25, and there was 20 of them, and we were discussing what their hopes are for a possible, if it was a blue skies, kind of no limits, no budgetary constraints, what would you love to see? And a lot of those young people were about developing better relationships with their parents, their family members. And they did mention, even as adults, if they have children, and how do they support their children with the transition also. So it is major, it's a major factor. Young people are living at home for a lot longer too, so you still need to coexist at home with your family members. And if you're not able to be your authentic self in your home environment, that is incredibly challenging. You spend a lot of time there. If you feel you can't either be safe or just comfortable being who you are.
I think that I'm just going to make a note. That might be a separate topic where we look at how do we support families through that journey, and what can service providers do to facilitate some of those discussions in a it's a fine line, because we don't want to shame or blame, but we also need to call out sometimes some of the harmful things and not be, it's how do we show some tolerance and not be intolerant to intolerance, but also calling it out when it's so complex. And I think some people just don't know how to go into that space.
Yeah, and look, and I'm not sure if I'm the perfect person for it, because I come from a space of my family with my trans daughter. It was just like, oh, okay, and it was such a non-issue. The issues were about how do we navigate to affirm her gender and help the transition. Even her sisters, I remember we sat around the kitchen table. It was Christmas Day, and we were sharing presents, and my daughter said, "Girls, I need to tell you something." And we kind of looked at each other, and I'm like, "Yep, go for it." And she said, "I'm a girl," and both her sisters went, "Oh yeah, we kind of figured something like that." And then we just moved on. Oh, well, actually, then everyone was spilling the beans about their sexuality, actually, and they were asking me. And I'm just like, oh, okay. So as a mum, I'm like, right, okay, yep, at least we know where everyone stands. So I suppose for me, it's been a positive experience. I can certainly appreciate that when I was a little kid, I didn't know anyone that was transgender, gender diverse, or non-binary. It was certainly not visible. I came from a migrant family, so I was non-English speaking when I started primary school, and so for me, I had a very insular life. So I can appreciate other parents if they come into a space with their child that they don't understand. And I think that's the whole thing. They just don't understand it. It's completely foreign to them. They're scared, and especially we all want to belong to communities in different ways. So you don't want to be on your own, experiencing something on your own. So it could be quite scary for them too. But I think with the right support for the family members, so they know it's actually going to be okay. The child that you have is still your child. That doesn't change. And that there is support out there. Like there's parents of, I'll have to look it up for you. I'm pretty sure the group is called Parents of Gender Diverse Children. They're a fabulous resource to support parents. We can probably put that link on. I can find you that. That was created by two parents who had transgender, gender diverse children, and they recognised there was no supports for them. Yeah, so there's resource out there.
I was actually going to say, what are some resources? So how about we, there's a couple as well that I know of. We can put them in the show notes for people to look at, some resources for young people, for parents, for service users, as well as for professionals to upskill their knowledge.
Absolutely. And I know the Primary Health Network, the Northwest Primary Health Network has a transgender training module. There's excellent resources at Transgender Victoria that people can look at. So resources and training opportunities. So we might grab all that kind of information and then you can share that with your listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just having a quick look now at that. It's the Trans GP module. Is that the one?
Yeah, there's that one. Yes.
Great. We'll put them all up, and there's some Health Alliance, Rainbow. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, we'll there's a few there. Yeah, -18 have training information on their website. Thorn Harbour Health are fabulous with training. So there are resources out there. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And it's really exciting to be welcoming a new bricks and mortar service in the West.
Yeah, thank you.
Do we have some vague timelines when we can cut that red ribbon?
Yeah, look, I suppose ultimately for us, we're in for the long haul. Our organisation have recognised that there's a definite need in community. We're estimating that we probably have a population of about 3,000 just in the LGAs alone that we have, and they're conservative numbers when you look at the WHO statistics. So we are in for the long haul. At the moment, I'm just waiting to hear from the executive team if we'll be funded for the next phase, which will be the setup, but the organisation are very committed to having this up and running. So hopefully, watch this space. It will be in the next few months that we can maybe catch up again and talk about how we've started implementing services.
Yeah, that'll be wonderful.
But it will. Oh, thank you. But it will be with our fabulous community members. So they're the ones that are going to be shaping all of this for us.
Wonderful. And thank you so much for taking the time to share this exciting project or innovation challenge. And congratulations for winning it. I'm picturing this big Shark Tank thing with like all these judges. And
it was similar, but they were very friendly. So that was lovely. But no, thank you, Marie, for your time. And I'm no way of an expert, but if anyone needs any further information or support, they can reach out and I'm happy to chat or link you in with other more relevant people that can talk to you about it.
Excellent. Well, I think we don't always need, the big fancy experts. It's trying to talk about what we see on the ground. This is the best information we have now. If this changes, we'll update another episode. We acknowledge what we've learned and just keep, it's real people doing real stuff on the ground in a local capacity. And I think people like to hear about that.
Yeah, thank you. That you're so right. And that's where it hits the most important mark, isn't it? It's for our community members that are desperately needing support.
Well, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Marie.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes for today's episode's resources, and don't forget to click subscribe and review us wherever it is you get your podcast.